Hey, everybody, welcome back to the SCB Steelers Podcast presented by DEK Roofing Incorporated of South Florida. We are pleased, as always, to be part of the Variety Sports Network, and I am coming to you from the Frank Walker Law Studio. Cheers, everyone. And that is not Ben's stunt. Well, it's Ben's stunt double. I think Ben is at a Dave Matthews tribute thing tonight. It's probably called Crash or something like that.
Is it really?
I have no idea. You know, there's probably one called that though, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there has to be. Cliff is filling in for Ben tonight. Cliff has done a fantastic job covering the draft. He and Dom doing a great job, and so he's gonna dazzle us with his draft expertise this evening. Just pretend like you do, Cliff.
Okay,
just pretend.
no pressure.
That's what we do. We just pretend the whole time. We don't know what the hell we're talking about.
All right.
And it looks like no school for Jackson, says Aaron. So he's joining us tonight. I guess that means we shouldn't use bad language because I explicitly said on the YouTube channel that children are not allowed to watch this program. So Aaron is already violating that, typical Ohio State guy. And in any case, once again, congratulations to Mr. Scarpino and his wife on the arrival of their daughter. And he said everything is going great. And we also had a new arrival down in the DEK Roofing family too on Tuesday. Little Tyler, he's the second boy now out of 6, 4 girls and 2 boys. So everybody's healthy, good stuff going all around. Oh boy, where to begin here? Okay, so it's obviously a week before the draft, and that is the big topic of conversation. But we will start tonight with Aaron Rodgers, strictly because he popped up on the Pat McAfee Show today, and everybody got a little giddy as to what he might say. And, nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. Cliff, you saw a little bit of the clip, I think, right?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I got sucked into that, and I wish I hadn't watched it, but I watched a little bit of it and spent a lot of time listening to him talk about pretty much nothing. So we're still at the same spot we were a couple weeks ago, I think.
Yeah. The two things I took from it was he seemed to, as you said, he did a lot of talking to say very little. And the thing I just laughed at, he said money's not the issue. I'll play for $10 million. If he signs with anyone and plays for $10 million, I will get an Aaron Rodgers jersey. I'll tell you right now, because he's not playing for $10 million. But in any case, that was, I don't know. Ian, did you catch it today?
I usually do not watch McAfee, but I usually see enough clips retweeted on Twitter that I can kind of parse together what happened. And it was basically like that episode of Seinfeld where George and Jerry go to the NBC producers and they're like, we're going to make a show about nothing. It's just about nothing.
It's great.
You want to do something? Nothing. Like that was the whole thing. It was a bunch of nothing, like Cliff said. So it's like when Antonio Brown was not in the news for a few days and had to do something stupid to get his name back in the news. Like Aaron Rodgers is just such a narcissist that he wants to hear about himself. So it's like, oh, they're not talking about me anymore. I better call up my buddy McAfee. And, it was, no news.
Scarps, would you take Rodgers if he said, I'll sign for the Steelers this year for $10 million?
I really don't want him to sign here. I just don't.
I'm the same way, man.
I will say this though. I didn't listen to it live. I was cutting my grass. And I mean, hell, you would have thought the Steelers won a Super Bowl today. That's how much fucking chatter there was on Twitter, and everybody was freaking out. And really didn't say anything. I guess I want to defend him. Maybe I don't want to defend. I want to show some empathy because when
Okay.
we talk about the personal things going on in his life, I don't know if I can relate to the specifics of what he's going through, but it kind of puts it like it's like, okay, at the end of the day, like the dude's still a human being, right? Like he has,
True.
he poops and pees the same way we do. He puts his pants on the same way we do. Like, and you know what? It sounds to me like he's going through some personal shit. And we all know, all the fans are always like, "What baggage are you talking about?" Well, there's plenty of baggage in his personal life. He doesn't talk to his family, his past relationships.
Mhm.
Shailene Woodley's at it, or
She's one of them.
she's one of it. Like she just had some comments about him. So like to say he doesn't have baggage, the guy definitely has baggage. But when he was saying that today, I was kind of like, oh, okay, I get it. And he talked about, he's like, hey, I'm not holding anybody hostage. I've been honest with teams and upfront with teams. So if that's the case, and I agree he's a narcissist. Like he reminds me of our beloved quarterback who was here a long time and just always had the impeccable timing of showing up and commenting on things, like right before the draft or right this and that.
Yeah.
So like you're right, he is a narcissist. I totally get that, but like if I have no reason to not believe that's how he's conducted business, right? I can't.
Yeah.
I don't think he's lying about that. And if that's the case, and this gets back to what I've been saying all along, is that I don't blame him for taking his time or doing whatever he needs to do. I mean, for Christ's sake, the guy rented a white Chevy Malibu and then drove it to the back of the fucking facility. I mean, it's not like he came in on a private jet or a fucking, a fancy car or whatever. A white Chevy Malibu. That sounds like he's a Pittsburgher already. I just as much as I do think he's a narcissist, I want to say like I just felt that like he was honest today, and I related to that. And again, if the Steelers are waiting on him, and I've been saying this, that's on the Steelers, man. That is not on Aaron Rodgers.
Cannot disagree with that.
And the Giants were like, you know what? Hey, dude, we get it, but we can't wait for you anymore.
Right.
And obviously we don't really have a quarterback on our roster except for Mason and Skylar Thompson. But like, hey, I am critical of this team, and it's funny because I don't get called a hate. Only Ben calls me a hater. I don't get called a hater as much as I used to now because I think fans are starting to get frustrated. But really, shame on the Steelers for being at this point. Really, I mean, they made this. They made their bed. So
I think it's a good take. And yes, well played there, Ian. Well played.
Thank you, Ian.
Scarps is a hater. I think
not here, so I had to pitch it.
I do wonder, as our buddy Craig said on social media, and others have said that when you start talking about retirement, then you're probably retired. And plus when I look at the fact that the draft is essentially 7 days away, unless there's been some kind of agreement between Rodgers and the Steelers, and I don't think there has been, but we need to know who to draft. And I think the idea of a quarterback is they're probably going to take one at some point in this draft anyway. I don't know. Cliff, does it make a big difference if he's signed or not as to where they might take a quarterback?
It does. And honestly, I'm a little bit worried. I guess my biggest fear with the whole Rodgers deal is if he were to not sign and the Steelers were to try to push, overdraft a quarterback in the first round at number 21 and then think they have their guy, completely bypass the 2026 class, which is a lot better. What's worse, having Rodgers for a year or getting stuck with a quarterback that we really don't want and then losing next year's, potential franchise guy because we think we might have something with maybe Shedeur Sanders.
Oh, God. We'll get into that. We'll get into that. Was that brought up in our Slack chat this week? Who would you rather have, Shedeur or Rodgers?
I think we've talked about it before.
I think it did. Yeah. Yeah. Hey, Dom, good to see you here tonight. And obviously, thanks everybody for joining us, whether you join us live or at your own leisure, as they say in England.
Do you want me to answer that question?
Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I honestly, I think I would rather take Rodgers for 1 year over drafting Shedeur, because if you draft a guy, there's an expectation that you're going to at least give him a chance for a few years, and you tie yourself to somebody for a longer term. So as much as I've been on the anti-Aaron Rodgers train, I think I would rather have Rodgers for 1 year than draft Shedeur.
Scarps, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I guess I would say the same, and I would also say this: if they do draft Shedeur, I don't think there's a guarantee that he starts. I really don't. Kenny Pickett did not start. Mitch Trubisky started, so they brought in a free agent quarterback, and they stuck with him. I know Mason is in a 2-year deal, but Mason has familiarity here, and he's probably the guy that could bet one. Just like Canada, whatever Canada ran, Mason was the best guy to do it. And I think that he would be the best guy to run what Arthur Smith wants to do. And, I know, but look at last year. Falcons they paid Kirk Cousins a ton of money, drafted Michael Penix at 7, and Penix didn't play till very end of the season. Right. So there's no guarantee you play as there's a good chance you play as a first rounder, but not always.
Well, and to that point, Joe asks or comments, says drafting Jackson Dart or Shedeur Sanders doesn't stop me from drafting a QB next year. I agree with you, Joe. The only exception to that is if they happen to go at 21. Then I would say maybe they really think one of these two guys, whomever it was that was drafted there, they would want to invest a couple of years in. And that's what concerns me too, because like Cliff said, next year's QB class is just better. It is just better flat out. And so I tend to think it's more about if they draft somebody like on day 3, then it's just a place filler, maybe a future backup type guy. But I don't know. People are just absolutely enthralled right now with Sanders at 21 coming to us. You're seeing a lot of chatter on social media and even some of the top draft experts are starting to go that way too. I personally, I don't see it, but what do I know? Cliff?
I mean, if I can jump in real quick,
absolutely.
Going back to the comment, if you draft Dart or Shedeur, it doesn't stop you from drafting another quarterback in the first round next year. Yeah, Arizona did that with Rosen.
That's right.
And then moved on. But if that's the thought process, then my I guess rebuttal to that would be then this year's first round draft pick is kind of a wasted pick then. So I wouldn't want to draft one of those two guys to say, well, hey, next year we could still take a quarterback. It's kind of all or nothing. I mean, don't bypass a defensive lineman or someone great that you can get this year to get a quarterback next year.
Well, you mentioned defensive linemen, and so let's really start looking at the draft a little bit here. Ian, I think you had a good question today, and I think let's piggyback on that. And your question was, who are the 5 guys we would want to see the Steelers draft at 21? Wasn't that the question?
My question was actually, who are the 5 guys you think they might draft, not who do you want them to draft?
Okay, so not who do you want, but who we think they actually will draft at 21.
Based on the available evidence and all that, yeah.
Okay, so I tell you what, why don't you start it? Go ahead and give us a guy that you think that you believe they will draft if he's there at 21.
I think I've come full circle on this one, but I think Nick Emanwari from South Carolina, if he's on the board, is absolutely in play. The more I thought about it, you asked me the question on the show a few weeks ago about if I read anything into them sending Gerald Alexander down there to work him out at his pro day. Yeah. And I didn't at the time, but the more I thought about it, then they brought him to Pittsburgh for a pre-draft visit. I'm kind of like, yeah, this kind of makes a lot of sense to have a playmaking chess piece in the middle of the defense. Mm-hmm. And so he's one guy that I don't know if he makes it to us at 21, but if he's there, I think he's pretty high on the list.
Cliff, before I get your first answer, I do want to ask you this question about Emanwari. I see a lot of different pundits, it seems to me he's more of a in the box guy. But then I see other people say, "Oh no, he can play free safety." I mean, what you did a profile on him? What did you see?
Yeah, he's kind of like a Kyle Hamilton. I mean, he's he's big. I mean, he's almost linebacker size, but he can run. I mean, he's very fast. He's very athletic. Good vert, good explosion. He's a big hitter. I think he could pretty much. Your options are wide open with that kid. I mean, he can be used either way. You could use him as free. You could use him up in the box, stop the run. I mean, he's kind of just a weapon. So, I mean, he's a little bit tight-hipped, and because of his size, he doesn't move like a corner. So I wouldn't say that he would be a player that you would necessarily put in the slot to cover a slot receiver or something like that. He'll shut down a tight end, though.
Sure.
So, coverage-wise, maybe there's a little bit of a negative there as far as covering wide receivers. But other than that, I mean, he's a guy you could use all over the place.
So with that in mind, who would be your first guy that you think the Steelers would take there at 21? Reasonably thinking a person is going to be there at 21.
That I think would probably be Derek Harmon, the defensive lineman out of Oregon. He's been moving up draft boards quite a bit. He's basically, a lot of the comps that I see for him are basically Cam Hayward. He kind of models his game after Cam Hayward. Good motor. I don't know if it's just Oregon defensive players that I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around, but that's not my first pick. But I think as far as how everything's starting to play out and how I'm kind of starting to see some trends and the interest levels and things like that, I think that Harmon will probably be a pick that they'll be.
Yeah, no, you're right. He's starting to be a guy that I don't know if he's going to be there at 21.
Right.
He's sneaking up boards.
He is. It's always interesting for me because between the college football season ending and not even considering the combine, but how much draft boards change from football to combine to after the combine. I'm seeing a lot of people that have Kenneth Grant in the second round now, and in the beginning he was kind of neck and neck with Mason Graham. So, and now Harmon, went from kind of like a mid second round grade to he's, in the teens. So there's a good chance that he's not there at 21.
Scarps, who's a guy you think the Steelers would take if he's there at 21?
Yeah. Oh man, I don't know. This is a tough question. We're going to get to pick more guys, right? Yeah. This is just like the first wave. Yeah. So I'm going to stick with what my dream is, and I've been saying this for months now, is get me the most athletic defensive interior lineman. And while we just mentioned Harmon, I actually do like Walter Nolan from Ole Miss, and I like that he played in the SEC. And he is by far not the, like, I don't want to say polished, but whatever. He's a project. But if there is one group or one position that I think our coaches, and I think Carl Dunbar is a good coach, could get the most out of him. So I'd be comfortable with Walter Nolan. I think he's good against the run, and I think that's what they've really, really struggled against, especially down the stretch. And nothing against the Big Ten. Obviously, Oregon was a semifinalist, but I'm not going to turn down a guy that played in the SEC if he's available.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah. So, Ian, who do you have next on your board there that somebody you think the Steelers would take at 21?
I know we've talked a lot about him on previous shows, but Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State, that I don't want to say he's the safest pick as a wide receiver in this draft because there's never a safe pick. Things can happen. Injuries can happen. Guys don't pan out. But he just seems like the kind of ultimate team player, does the gritty work, is willing to block, is a solid route runner. And just, I mean, they've already invested a lot of money in DK Metcalf and, very significant asset in a second-round pick that if you take Ibuka as a complement to Metcalf, I think those two could be a really good tandem of receivers, and then it gives you the option to trade George Pickens for potentially getting back into the second round, which is a win-win for everybody.
It sure would be. It sure would be, right? Cliff, you looked, your reaction was that Ian maybe had stolen your thunder on that one?
Well, he's been my favorite player for the Steelers from the beginning of the draft process. He's not your fastest guy, but he knows how to get open. He blocks. He sees the field like a quarterback does. I mean, I've actually seen videos of him studying film with his coordinators and his quarterbacks, giving input and saying, "Hey, look here, blah, blah, blah," and giving his insight. The last time that we had a wide receiver that wasn't a burner, that could get open, that blocked his tail off, Hines Ward didn't do too bad here. No. So if that's going to be the comp that we're looking at, I'm enamored with that. And a matter of fact, like most wide receivers that you get, to actually find one that's not a head case these days is pretty good. So, I'm all about Ibuka. He's probably my favorite player in this draft.
Yeah, you're not the first person I've heard say that. I mean, he's impressing to people that much. Scarps, who would your next guy be?
Yeah, I'd be fine with that. I also like Matthew Golden from Texas.
That was going to be my next one. Good choice.
I think that I'd be totally okay if they went either one of those wide receivers. But I would
I'm sorry, Ryan. That comment by Freak.
Cliff, you've been accepted. You have been accepted.
Mark, you got to read that one out loud.
Yes, I'm getting there. Yeah. Freak just posted here that he's referring to Cliff as a nicer, smarter, and dried out version of Ben.
He's like the more responsible older brother.
He is. That's exactly what he is. Oh, God, that's terrific, Freak. Wonderful.
It's hard to follow that up. Getting back to the Pickens thing, and it's he's not. I would be stunned if he got a second contract here. So, I can't be worried about his feelings.
No.
So even if we draft, Golden or the kid from Ohio State, who cares? Like, that doesn't mean we have to trade Pickens.
No.
But if we did and got back into the second round, I know that would hurt a lot of people's feelings, but I think that would probably set us up for success. Because DK Metcalf, bless his heart, is feisty and has been fined numerous times for his actions. And
it's a good point. He's not a choir boy at times.
So yeah.
Ian, give me a couple more guys here that you're thinking that at 21 Steelers are going to pull the trigger.
Yeah. So the last 2 years, the guys they drafted in the first round, they did bring to Pittsburgh for a pre-draft visit. So just looking through that list, kind of off the radar guy, but late riser has been Trey Amos from Ole Miss as a cornerback. He started his career, I think he's transferred a few times, but I think he started at Louisiana Lafayette and then went to Alabama and then to Ole Miss. But, physical, athletic corner, probably isn't one of the top corners in this draft class, but in kind of that second tier that whether they stay at 21 or potentially trade down, which to me, like, trade down is better than a lot of these options.
We'll get to the trade down.
Yeah. I would probably take Harmon, Eamon Worry, Ibuka,
Mhm.
maybe Golden over a trade down, but like trade down is like third or fourth on my list of like best options at number
Okay.
21. But nevertheless, I think Trey Amos is another option. And I know Cliff mentioned Kenneth Grant from Michigan too, but I'll let Cliff talk. I don't need
Yeah.
to.
Cliff, who's a
Not
couple
all.
other guys that you think the Steelers could pull the trigger on there at 21?
Yeah, most of those guys I had kind of written down. I think Grant, he's one it's surprising to me. The reason that I like Grant so much is because of the fact that you can plug him in at nose tackle and move Benton back outside, and then with someone like Harmon or somewhere down the line, I think you have to go back and maybe look later rounds like a Jamari Caldwell or something like that, someone that's a true nose, because I don't really think that is Benton's true position. I like Golden. And another point I can make about that too is, I mean, one thing that if we're really struggling looking for a quarterback, especially one that's 41 or one that's a rookie or whatever, I mean, having three very good wide receivers on the field is not going to be such a bad thing. So if you do have Pickens, Golden, or Ibuka, then you have DK on the other side. That's kind of opens up a lot of options too and makes it a little bit friendly, a little more quarterback.
That's a good point.
But yeah, I mean, if they want to go with someone that they really think is special, Amenwari's a good player. Like, he might be one of those guys that's just physically, he's just different than everybody else. And then another guy that I thought, maybe they learned their lesson, but I don't know. But Omarion Hampton out of North Carolina is getting a lot of love, and there's a lot of people that actually have given him some consideration over Genty, that they think he has a more complete game, and Genty kind of fades against some bigger competition. So that's another option, because they really do need a running back.
Yeah, the running back draft positions are going to be interesting. I mean, I think everybody's got Genty, top 5, top 7 at absolute worst, and you just don't know. I mean, he's got some ball security issues, if I recall. And that doesn't usually scare teams away based on his overall production, but you never know. It might at that top 5, 7 or not. Scarp's a couple other dudes that you wouldn't mind seeing, or I shouldn't say that you think the Steelers might take at 21.
Yeah. I've been obviously out of the loop, so whatever. But we talked about safety. Malachi Starks is another kid. Georgia, they love Georgia players.
They do.
And then I bet he was a recent pre-draft visit. Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M, and then Nick Scourton's another one from Texas. So Texas A&M got 2 edges. Scourton's only 20.5, so he's but like that would probably hurt a lot of people's feelings too. But TJ Watt isn't going to play forever.
No.
And I will say this, I really don't. So getting back to I'm just going to call him the kid from South Carolina because I can't remember his name. And again, I'm preparing to fail. What is it? Bill Walton said that about John Wooden. Used to say that failing to prepare is preparing to fail.
Right.
So this is just me, but I frankly do not care who they take at 21, as long as it's not an offensive lineman or a quarterback. I don't care what side of the ball it is. I need a playmaker. And I know that sounds crazy, but this team lacks playmakers. It does. It's that simple.
Yeah.
And TJ Watt's one of them, who's going to be 32. And he's going to sign an extension. Cam Hayward's 35, 36. Cam doesn't have a lot left. Obviously DK, Pickens, maybe too inconsistent. So if they go with a safety, the kid from South Carolina, I don't care. If they go with Malachi Starks, I don't care. If they go with an edge, I don't give a shit. Just like put the best players on the field, and then gets into scheme and all that stuff, whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I went over the thing, but I really do not want a running back, but I could be I could be
Coerced.
Yeah, I could get on board with that, but I think there's a decent amount of running back talent in the 3rd and 4th round that you don't have to take one at 21. But I know this is gonna hurt some people's feelings, but Jaylen Warren is not a 3 down back. He's just not, and they need to if you can, I'd be comfortable with Jaylen Warren, Kenneth Gainwell, and then another guy that can tote the rock and you could get him in the middle rounds. The fact that Cordarrelle Patterson, and I know he's watching the show right now, and
absolutely, CP,
I appreciate you and all that you've done on all that you haven't done on crack tosses, but come on, man.
You make a fair argument. Ian, you wanted to make a point on the D lineman?
Yeah, so if I can just go on a bit of a tangent here. They have spent a lot of time on defensive linemen this whole draft. And Ryan mentioned about, take the most athletic defensive linemen. So just as a quick rundown, the 2 Michigan guys, Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Terrell Austin went to their pro day. Grant, they met with at the Combine in the Shrine Bowl. Derek Harmon from Oregon, they had him for a pre-draft visit. Walter Nolan from Ole Miss. Andy Weidel attended his pro day. And then the day 2 guys, Tyleek Williams and Ty Hamilton from Ohio State, Con, Tomlin, Austin at his pro day, Darius Alexander from Toledo, pre-draft visit, Josh Farmer from Florida State, pre-draft visit, Alfred Collins from Texas, Tomlin was at his pro day, onto the day 3 guys like JJ Pegas from Ole Miss, Jamari Cardwell from Oregon, Yaya Black from Iowa. I'm probably butchering these name pronunciations, but that's okay. Jared Harrison Hunt from SMU. All 4 of those guys came in for pre-draft visits. So they've spent time on this whole defensive tackle class, not just the top end guys, but the day 2 and day 3 guys. It would not shock me to see them take 2 defensive linemen in this draft. I don't know if they have enough picks to do that with their other needs, but we talked about this at the very end of the season when we kind of did our roster rundown, that other than Keanu Benton and Logan Lee, who they just drafted last year, everybody else on the defensive line's over 30 years old. They got to get younger at this position.
Well, they brought back Loudermilk, on a year deal. And I think he is what he is. He can come in and makes for a few plays, but he's not going to make significant stops, if you will, and significant impact on the game, I don't think. So are you suggesting that if you had to, you would lean towards potentially them going with doubling up at defensive line?
I think it's entirely possible. And going back to the Senior Bowl, Mike Tomlin loves those Senior Bowl guys. Yeah. And thinking about all the reports on Twitter that was Mike Tomlin just watched the defensive line all day at the Senior Bowl and ignored everything else. They definitely knew coming into this offseason that defensive line was going to need to be a priority. So I wouldn't hate it.
No, I wouldn't either. And I think one thing, just to be clear, I don't know if everybody knows this, but, Tomlin and Kahn usually hit Georgia, Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Michigan. And they didn't hit Michigan this year because that was the same day that Rodgers came to visit in Pittsburgh. So I'm just going to go ahead and play it as if they were there. I'm not really going to take much out of that one way or
they did go to Texas too, which I think was noteworthy, but Texas has a bunch of pretty good prospects.
Right. Yeah. And that's not one that they typically go to like the others, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
I know the one thing is they rarely go out west. Troy Fatanu last year, they did not go see.
On that note though, I believe, and Cliff may remember better than me, but I think Washington's pro day was either the last day of the NFL owners meetings or the day right after. Washington had a weird pro day schedule where I think Tomlin and those guys were all in Florida or wherever it was for the NFL owners meetings. And since Tomlin's on the competition committee, he has to be there. Yeah. So that one didn't. And they brought Fatanu in for a pre-draft visit to Pittsburgh
Right.
anyway, so
Right.
that one didn't really seem like a off the charts one that it broke a trend, even though they didn't go to his pro day just because like the travel schedule didn't work out. So I don't know how much I'd read into that.
Let me. I'm going to throw some names at you, and you guys just tell me yes or no. Okay, and I'll keep it at pick 21. Okay.
Okay.
All right, Cliff. Luther Burden, the third.
And this is a yes or no.
Well, just, I mean, you can obviously comment about it. I'm just curious to get your take. Is he a guy you would maybe think about at 21 or no?
Probably not. I mean, he is a lot like Deebo Samuel.
Mm-hmm.
He's a guy that, you could line up in the backfield. He's very elusive. He's a shorter, solidly built guy. But I mean, I guess if you're going to have two outside guys like Pickens and DK, he would fit. But I think where Ekbuka, you could ultimately move outside. I don't know that you could do that with Burden. I mean, he's probably played there before, but
yeah.
His production, I don't think he's really put up as much as some of the other guys. He was probably the highest ranked receiver in the very beginning of the draft process out of all of them, other than McMillan and Travis Hunter, I guess, if you consider him a wide receiver. But
yeah,
I'm kind of out on Burden.
Okay, love it. Good answer. Scarps, here's one for you. Tight end Tyler Warren drops to 21.
Why? So they could get another Penn State tight end they don't throw to?
Are you suggesting they've had other ones?
Yeah, fuck. They paid $50 million last year. Although, to be fair, Muth actually had a pretty good year last year. He's, I think,
he is what he is.
But also, I think, as a, I actually love that Ben isn't on the show tonight because I could talk about fantasy football here a little bit and talk about the struggles that come with drafting a tight end, like a Kyle Pitts or something like that, and they just suck. And it's better to just, stream a tight end each week. But Muth actually didn't have a bad year last year. But I would not draft Warren at that at 21. Okay. I would not. I'm sorry. But listen, Michael Pruitt is going to get 6-7 balls a year. Like let's make sure he gets his. But I will say this. Remember when everyone told us that fucking Darnell Washington was going to be this fucking amazing and he what does he even do? So you're literally drafting. You would be drafting him here and not using him. I don't want to do that.
Look, I'll say this about Darnell real quick. I don't know why they don't just have him run 8 yards ahead, turn and box out whoever's there and just throw him the ball. I do it more often. They've done it a few times, but
I actually don't think he has the coordination and skills to be able to do that. I really don't.
Maybe not, Scarps. I
not at this level.
Yeah, that might be right. Ian,
if I have to say this because if Ben was here, he would chime in with this.
Oh, well, of course he would.
But Darnell Washington is taller, has a bigger wingspan, and has bigger hands than Broderick Jones. Yeah. They should take him to a buffet, have him put on 30 pounds, and move him to tackle. Ben's been saying this since before the draft that before the draft, he was like, Darnell Washington could play tackle. And teams have done that. I mean, we've done it with players. The Seahawks did it with, what was that guy's name? Joe Gillum from Penn State, who was a tight end, and they moved him to offensive tackle. And at some point, Darnell Washington, if he's smart, is going to look at things and be like, as a backup tight end, I could be a journeyman and make $1 million a year, or I could be a mediocre offensive tackle a media Chuks Okorafor has gotten 2 contracts since he left Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And Dan Moore Jr. got paid this year, and Dan Moore was not what I would say would be a top 10 tackle, but he got a lot of money.
Mhm.
So, pack on some weight. He's got the body for it. You could move him to tackle if Fatanu or Jones don't work out.
Yeah, Ben has said that since day one
Mhm.
with Washington. I guess my gut feeling is they would have done it by now if they really felt that way. But by the way, kudos to Freak. Ben is really at a hair club for men seminar. Hey, easy on the follically challenged there, Freak. Easy. Ian, I need to ask you about a guy. So here, I'll stay with the tight ends. What if Colston Loveland is there at 21?
See, now I'm not as high on Loveland as some other people are, so I would say no. I would
either.
pass on that one. I've seen some people say he's a first round guy. I've seen some people say he's a top 10 talent in this draft, and I just don't see it. So I'm gonna pass on Loveland. Although I would have given opposite answers to what Cliff and Ryan said for their guys, but I will pass on the guy you gave me.
I look, as a Michigan guy, I will flat out tell you I like Loveland, but I would not draft him. He's been hurt a lot. I don't know how good of a blocker he is. I mean, at the college level, he was okay. I just, first round, no. That's just me. Whether I'm right, I have no idea. Cliff, who's a guy that you really, really like in this draft? I mean, I know you've talked about Ibuka and stuff, but is there another guy that's really jumped out at you as far as like, man, this is a guy I would love to see in the black and gold?
Are we talking any round?
Yeah, I'm just like any guy you've seen so far.
One guy that I'm surprised, and maybe it's because it's such a deep running back class that I really like, is Dylan Sampson. He was in for a pre-draft visit, SEC Offensive Player of the Year. He runs hard. He's not super big, but he's pretty tough to tackle. He's pretty solid. He tends to hit the hole a little bit too quickly. He doesn't have very much patience, but I mean, we've been kind of missing that hesitation. And,
right.
I'm sure he could catch a toss on the outside, like Artie Smith likes to do so much. But I liked Sampson, and he's a guy I think that they could probably get later than normal. That he's kind of getting lost in the shuffle a little bit.
He actually, I think it was Dane Brugler from The Athletic. I think he had him going to the Steelers in the third round today. In his final mock. So, third round, I think that's pretty good value for him.
I've seen him as far as, like the 150 range.
Wow.
So that people have him ranked, and he's just, and I don't get it. I mean, maybe because he didn't run as fast as they thought he would in his 40. But again, it goes back to the post, you end the season and then a lot of guys, watch the combine and you forget that guys are actually good football players. Like Malachi Starks is another one. We talked about him a little bit earlier. He was considered like a top 10, top 15 pick at the very beginning. Then, he ran a little bit slower and now he's dropping. But he was one of those can't miss safety types that everybody loved. And, there's some football players out there that just,
they're just football players.
Yeah.
They don't run fast. They don't do this well. They just play well on the football field. Which I think most of us love those guys. What was I just going to ask here? I was just looking at my other screen here. The trade down possibility. Look, first and foremost, we all know in order to do this, you have to have a partner. You've got to have somebody willing to do that. So, Ian, you've kind of been on this bandwagon in our Slack chats every day.
Literally, Mark's being generous. Literally every day, I'm like, they should trade down.
Well, I'm with you. I'm always a fan of trading down. I mean, unless I've got like a top 5 pick or something like that, but I'm almost always a fan. I want more picks. I want more bodies. Omar was very clear at the owners meeting 2 weeks ago. He flat out said we would love to recoup that second round pick. And obviously there's only a couple of different ways you can do that. But, what how do you see the possibility of that happening?
So there's a couple different routes you could go. And I know teams are very hesitant to give up their first round pick, or I should say trade out of the first round entirely, because that first round pick comes with that 5th-year option, which really does benefit teams from a contract standpoint.
Right.
So the problem is, if you're looking to trade back, there has to be a player that someone behind you wants to come up and get. And this draft class is one where I think, after the first maybe 5 or 7 picks, it's wide open. I mean, Dane Brugler and his beast had, I think, 13 or 14 players with first-round grades, and then after that, there was 20 players that had a first/second-round grade on them. So there's not a lot of elite talent in this draft, but it's fairly deep at certain positions. So moving back, if there's a guy that somebody else has a really high grade on, if a team behind you wants to come up and get someone, you could make a trade back with a Buffalo, a Kansas City, a Philadelphia, and maybe get both their first and second round picks. The thing I've been looking at is, could you, because of all the Shedeur Sanders talk, right? And I think we're unanimous on the show. None of us want Shedeur Sanders. But if Shedeur Sanders is there at 21 and you've got some teams high up in the draft, Cleveland, the Giants, maybe Vegas, the Jets, maybe New Orleans even, who passed on quarterbacks in the top 10, can you convince one of them to move back up to pick 21 and give you their 2026 first round pick? And then it's we move down into still in the top 10 picks of the second round, but also add another first rounder next year, the year when we've all said, and Cliff played it out very well, 2026 is the year to go get a quarterback. So having 2 first round picks next year could be transformative for this franchise. So I would be willing to just punt on the first round this year and get an extra first rounder next year. And there have been teams that have done that in the past. I think Seattle's done it. The Patriots did it under Belichick. The Ravens might have done it one year where they just traded out of the first round entirely, but then wound up getting a pretty good haul of picks in return. So if Sanders falls to 21, which honestly, looking at the draft board, if he makes it past 9 with New Orleans, I think there's a pretty good chance he falls to 21, because not a lot of teams between 10 and 20 need a quarterback. And after us, all the other playoff teams, no one else needs a quarterback. So then really, if Sanders makes it past New Orleans at 9, it's pretty much either us at 21 or someone else trading up from the beginning of the second round who is also in that quarterback market. And really, for a quarterback, that 5th-year option is a big deal because of just how inflated quarterback salaries are. It's not as big of a deal for, say, a safety or a wide receiver.
You're exactly
crazy,
right.
But the quarterbacks it is. So I've talked enough. I'll let somebody else talk.
Scarps, if at 21, if you knew the Steelers were going to take a quarterback, and Sanders was there and Jackson Dart was there, who would you rather have?
I'll take the cyanide tablet.
I said Jeff. I knew you were going there. It wasn't really a fair question. And the reason I asked that is because I believe that somebody is going to take Dart higher than he deserves to be taken. And the same is probably true for a number of quarterbacks in this draft, because it's happened in recent drafts overall.
Steelers freak said I've been real quiet. I haven't slept a lot, bro. No, I'm just teasing. Steelers freak, you're fucking wonderful. I hate that I say this, because I want to be clear. I don't want any part of any quarterback in the first round this year. I don't care who it is.
Seconded.
That being said, I'm going to go with Dart over Sanders. And the reason is because Sanders does not have the size or arm strength at this level. Sanders, I saw this the other day. His longest pass, air yards wise, was 46 yards.
Ooh.
Out of any, I think out of any touchdown pass he threw, the longest air yards, the longest air yards was 46 yards. Come on now. So that's not throwing a 10-yard out to Travis Hunter and him taking it to the house. We're talking about 46 yards in the air. Dart, I have no problem with his arm strength, but I would also go with Dart based on competition. I mean, I don't want to hate on the kid because, like, although he doesn't do himself any favors with his fucking watches and flexing and this and that. All right, see, Steelers freak, I'm waking up a little bit, but I don't like. Obviously, you need to have swagger and confidence to play at this level, especially at quarterback. So I'm not knocking him for that. But I do wonder, and I mean this, I do wonder if his dad was not who his dad is, how much hype he would be getting right now. Because until he went to Colorado, he was at Jackson State, an FCS school. So, I don't know. I competition wise, I'd go with Dart. I really don't want either, but but I will say this though: okay, here we go. You ready? If we're talking, who can we get?
We'll actually be retiring Scarp's microphone later this week.
Is that bad? Thank you. Did I talk that much?
No.
If we're trying to get someone that reminds us of Ben a little bit, I'd go with Dart. If we're trying to get somebody that's going to take care of the football better, I would go with Sanders because I think he can take care of the football better.
Okay.
But we have seen over the past 5 years that, please God, don't let us turn the ball over where that's gotten us.
Yeah,
so
it's not a strategy. Let's see here. Cliff, what was I just going to ask you? Damn it, I had it in my head, and then I lost it. Damn this alcohol! No, I was going to ask you about where are you with the quarterbacks? Because I know you've done quite a bit of evaluation on it, and we've talked a little bit of Sanders and Dart and so on and so forth. Is there a guy in the day 3 category that you would look at and say, okay, I get it. I can see why they would draft this guy?
In day 3, yeah. I mean, I know that they just brought the kid in from Syracuse, McCord. If I remember right, I believe he played at Ohio State and did pretty well there.
Other than when he played Michigan.
Yeah, of course. But I mean, so the competition level's there. He's moved around a little bit. Is he going to be a career backup? Probably. I mean, but there's a lot of guys that are kind of designated to be a career backup, and they end up coming in and doing pretty well. Like, Purdy was the easiest example, but or Brady. But even Dak Prescott was picked a little bit later. So, you never know, but you definitely prefer somebody. I mean, Tyler Show or Shock or however you pronounce his name, floor ceiling guy. You're kind of getting what you're getting. I would rather take a guy that's probably going to be a backup that could potentially get better than somebody that is probably going to stay the same. So I would go with Howard or McCord or somebody like that could potentially maybe come in and not lose a game for you.
Okay. All right. Ian, what would you do in the day 3 quarterbacks?
Yeah, I think if I'm going to answer your question and also not answer your question, that if Shock is there in round 3, I think you might consider him. Just because he's got a high floor and
even without the number 2 pick, the second round pick rather.
Yeah, I think Shock is like Brandon Whedon, right? Shock is older than Trevor Lawrence by like 2 months, which is insane to think about that this dude's
Isn't
that
it,
old.
though?
But I think he's a guy who is developed enough that he could be a backup to Mason Rudolph this year and at least give you something and not have to like sit on the bench for 2 years like Jalen Milroe might. Like, we've talked about this before, but Milroe's got a lot of that Malik Willis, where we all said with Willis, he's got to sit for 2 years and learn how to throw the ball and be an NFL quarterback. And he did and actually turned out okay. But we don't have, in the short term, if we're looking at 2026 for, get the quarterback of the future, like waiting on Jalen Milroe to develop doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I think like if you're looking at a guy who could be a backup this year and kind of the long-term backup of the future, Shock in round 3 is fine. I agree with Cliff that either Will Howard, who they had dinner with before his pro day, Tomlin, Kahn, Arthur Smith were all at his pro day, and then Kyle McCord, who they had in for a pre-draft visit. And we talked about this a little bit last week with McCord too. He was a guy that tried to get an extra year of eligibility, but the NCAA said no, because when he was at Ohio State, they were so good in blowing teams out. He took too many snaps early in his career to be able to qualify for another redshirt year to stay in college another year. But he was a guy who the arrow's been kind of pointing upwards on, and those guys like Cam Ward this year, like Joe Burrow previously, Jaden Daniels also, that had that 5th year in college, they transferred to a new school and really took that next step forward. It kind of seemed like McCord was trending in that direction. He was better at Syracuse than he was at Ohio State. That he's trending in a good direction. So if you want someone with potential longer term upside, I think McCord isn't a bad choice. He probably is a long-term backup.
Yeah.
He's got the cojones to throw any ball. He doesn't necessarily have the arm strength to get balls somewhere that he tries to throw them, but he's got the willingness to just chuck it into wherever he wants to.
Freak is on top of it tonight, man. Ian is really focused and on it tonight. You must have stopped having sex. You're like Costanza.
I have 7 children. What makes you think that never mind. I'm not going to go there.
It's a family show. Scrubs, you wanted to chime in on the late round quarterback potential?
Yeah, I'm going to be a homer here because he was at Ohio, but he went to Indiana. Curtis Rourke, he's a big dude, 6'5", 223. Doesn't have the greatest arm strength, but he's a 5-year starter. And then a guy for Memphis who's a 4-year starter, Seth Hennigan. Again, I'm not saying these guys are going to be the future Steelers quarterbacks, but on a day 3, 6th or 7th round, I think those guys could be available. And you know what? You need bodies. Omar has talked about adding 2 more quarterbacks. Well, one of them may or not want to still play football, and they still need to add a guy. And then the other thing too is, and I know fans don't really necessarily see this, but like Chris Oladokun. I totally get like why at that point it was a wasted pick, because you had Mason, you had Kenny, and you had Trubisky already on the roster.
Right.
But like here you really don't have many options at quarterback. So like if they took like an Ola a lot of
that guy.
I can't even say it. He's a Super Bowl champion.
Yeah, he's got a ring.
But so's Kenny Pickett. Anyway, but those are some guys you could take in the on day 3 that like have experience and maybe you can develop. So,
hey, ladies and gentlemen, we have a special appearance from Ben. The Dave Matthews tribute band must be taking a break right now, and
they're playing a song off their new album. So everybody goes to the bathroom.
Oh man, Cliff, I want to ask you about Milroe, and because we've all kind of made the comment that any guy that they draft, it does not automatically mean they're not going to draft a quarterback next year. And I'm just kind of sitting here wondering to myself, why not take Jalen Milroe at some point and let him develop over the course of a couple of years? Because he's one of the few guys that you can use in other ways while he's still learning to be a quarterback. In other words, a slash type. Am I okay in thinking that?
Yeah, I mean, they need a running back, so he's in there. But I think Ian kind of nailed that one. He's Malik Willis. I mean, he's got a big arm. He's fast. I don't see it.
Okay.
Milroe he's definitely going to take a couple years. I mean, he's a good kid. I mean, he's smart and his teammates love him. But yeah, he's another one that I don't know.
You would just shy away from him altogether.
Yeah, and the main reason for that is because if we're saying that we have somebody that's going to take a couple years to develop,
mm-hmm.
I mean, do we have the people in place to develop a quarterback? I mean, we don't know that. I mean, we've had really last several years, it's been tough. I mean, Ben made the point a couple of times that there's a new offensive coordinator that, developed Tannehill and
mm-hmm.
Quarterbacks coach and stuff like that. I'm not sold on the fact that, like with Hurts or with Lamar Jackson, they built the offense to their strengths. We just kind of force feed everybody into like Najee running a toss play, who he's not the swiftest guy on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lot of square pegs and round holes and things like that. So I don't see the development that I don't think it's something that would be beneficial for the Steelers in long term. I don't think that it's really fair for Milroe because I don't know that he's going to ever get developed to that level.
It's a great point. I think you analyzed it well. I mean, for me, the guy is Shock, Show, whatever they call him, only because I think he comes with the most experience. He's got a good arm. He's got decent pocket presence, and he's going to be a guy that's going to be around for a few years, just as your backup. I'm not suggesting he's going to be your long-term starter by any stretch. I don't think any of us are with any of these guys, quite frankly. But just that experience. Whereas if I draft a guy like Milroe or Dart, I don't see them seeing the field the first year, even if you need them to. You know what I mean? Whereas at least with Tyler Shock, I can probably say, look, man, you've been in 3 pretty good offensive systems during your career. You're older. You've seen just about everything. I can afford to stick you out there for a game if you have to start because two guys are injured or something like that. I guess that's what I look at in that perspective. I don't know. What other positions do we need to talk about?
We talked about running backs a lot. They've spent a lot of time on this running back class.
They did.
They definitely have to take one somewhere, which I think talking about trading down into the early second round, then you start bringing, those 2 Ohio State guys into the conversation. But there's a Caleb Johnson from Iowa's pretty good. But there's a lot of depth in this running back class that you can get guys all over the place. Wide receiver too, they've spent some time on, and they do need some depth, especially with outside guys there. But there's some pretty decent prospects further down the board that they could take a shot on, and I wouldn't have a problem with.
If we're sitting here 1 week from tonight and the Steelers take a running back at 21, what would that suggest about the way they feel about Jalen Warren? I mean, because I agree with you. I don't know that Warren is a 3-down guy. I think you or Scarps had mentioned that.
Scarps did, yeah.
Yeah, and I agree. I don't think he is. But man, a running back at 21 would be, especially with as deep as this class is.
I mean, they took Najee at 22, right? So
right. I don't know. Cliff?
Yeah. I mean, I hope they learn their lesson, especially being that this is a very deep running back class.
Yeah.
There's a lot of guys. Warren, I still think that the reason that they didn't sign Najee to that 5th-year option was because they thought Warren had performed better and he was going to step in. Because prior to this past season, he wasn't really he didn't get injured a lot. He was kind of, it was 1A and 1B as far as, how they were handling the ball. So I think that the intention was to have Jaylen Warren as the starter, but now it's almost like they either got to get a kind of a 3-down type back earlier, or they need to just decide that they're going to continue to do the running back by committee and get a guy later. But it does look, with a lot of the guys that they're looking at, it does seem that they're looking for speed.
Yes.
They look at Henderson, I think, more than Judkins. Judkins is a tank where
he is,
a little bit quicker. And, so a lot of the guys that they brought in were basically home run hitters, and they haven't had that.
No, they haven't. And the other thing I like with Henderson is that he is completely willing to pass block as well. I think he's still got a little bit of fundamental stuff to clean up, but man, you want to talk about a willing dude. He reminds me of Warren a little bit. Warren's a very willing pass blocker as well. Scarps, when we're sitting here a week from tonight, what would absolutely ruin your evening next week?
What a question.
Besides my kid shitting in my hand, which is actually, it's amazing. Like shitting in my hand, it's beautiful. What would ruin my night, and I don't want to steal this, but I will. I posted on X the other day. It was a similar question, and I said any quarterback at 21.
Okay,
and then an account that it's very friendly and which I appreciate said if they trade up for a quarterback it would be even worse, and I agree. If they trade up for a quarterback, and I would even say this, if they trade up for anybody, I would be a little pissed off, unless it was for the super playmaker. And I'm with Ian. I think you stand pat at 21 and see if anybody is willing to do some business with you.
Yep.
Because if you know you're going to get your guy at 25 or 26, and that gets you a second-round pick, and you don't have to – I can't believe I'm saying this – and you don't have to trade Pickens, because I do not like George Pickens. But
really, I hadn't noticed.
If you can do that, I'm all for it. And let's be honest. As much as the Steelers have gotten it right this century when it comes to drafting, they've gotten it wrong too. But so have all the other 31 teams.
Right.
So there's always somebody willing. There's always somebody willing to take a risk to say, you know what, I need to get my guy right now, and those phones better be open.
What when they traded Martavis Bryant, was that on day 2? Yeah, that's what I thought. I'm just kind of opining here as to what they're going to do if they trade Pickens, because obviously if they did it before the draft, then that would really throw the whole first round predictions into a bit of a quagmire, if you will. But
giggity.
Giggity. Who else but Quagmire? Yeah. So I don't know, just something that I was kind of thinking in the back of my head here. Ian, who's a person that you would absolutely have your night ruined if they took it 21?
I mean, Shedeur Sanders was
yeah, that's the obvious. Give me somebody else.
All right, I'll go off the board a little bit. I go with Tet McMillan from Arizona. A lot of people think he's the number one wide receiver in this draft, but I'm just not. And maybe Shamar Stewart too from Texas A&M. I know they brought him in for a pre-draft visit, but for all the athleticism that dude has, he has like zero production. He had like 3 sacks, or like he like athletically and physical size wise, he's very similar to Myles Garrett. And you're like, okay, a guy of this size that runs this fast and, has a shuttle drill and 3-cone drill of this speed should be a lot better of a finisher. And he gets off the ball quick and gets a lot of pressures, but just doesn't get guys down in the backfield. So Shamar Stewart's going to be that like PFF all-star who it's like, he gets all these pressures, but 0 sacks. Like it's just, I don't like Shamar Stewart, and Tet McMillan just worries me. I don't know. It's just, I don't see it with that kid.
I'm kind of with you. Cliff, who's a guy that would ruin your night on Thursday night next week?
Well, I guess I'm going to represent Ben since I'm filling in for him a little bit. I'm going to say if they force a pick, like they have in the pass up best player available, they Grant, Harmon, all those guys are gone. So they force, a second, third round defensive lineman into a pick, and someone that is way too early. Shedeur Sanders is the easy one. I'm with Ian on McMillan. I don't see it. But trade down would be my favorite. Worst case scenario, I would think quarterback, because the Steelers, everything that they, with the exception of quarterback, this draft has. So you have defensive linemen that you can get late. You have running backs that you can get late. So I think, to Scarp's point, you go with a playmaker, best player available, someone that can either get after the quarterback, catch the ball, or stop the pass. So I'm looking for playmakers. If they get some defensive linemen that they could have gotten in the third round because the other ones that they liked were gone, then I'll be upset for that.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I mean, obviously, no selection they make, I think, is ever a 100% home run, because everybody's got their own ideas and agendas about what the Steelers should do and could do and all these things. But I do think, a guy like Harmon would be very difficult for anybody to be upset by that pick at 21. And certainly there's some other guys too. And, I'm curious to see how it all works out. I think it sure sounds like Ward is a no-brainer to go to Tennessee at the very top. And then after that, I think it's going to get interesting. What are the Browns going to do? I mean, they could go Travis Hunter. They could go Abdul Carter. I think it would be fantastic if they drafted Shedeur Sanders at number 2.
Dion threw a fit about that, though. He said he didn't want his kid going to the Browns.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
you're right.
I was really hoping that they might trade up from 33 to 21 to take Sanders and then give us next year's first round. That'd be perfect.
That would be.
Dion ruined it.
Man,
so.
You want to talk about owning the Browns fans for like the next 5 years? That'd be fantastic.
Yeah,
absolutely fantastic. I'm waiting on Casey. He must be limbering up in the background there. Ian, any final thoughts on this draft? Of course, next week, just a reminder, it will be our live draft show. We will probably be on the air about 9 p.m. with the Steelers picking at 21. That's roughly about 10 o'clock, if I remember correctly. And so is that right, Ian?
Yeah, probably 10. I mean, it's 10-minute picks in the first round, so there's a little more time.
Yeah.
So it starts at 8 o'clock Eastern time on the best coast. Don't believe what Ben says.
Correct.
But probably 10-15, somewhere in there. But we do like to get on a little bit before and, kind of talk about who's there and all that. Yep. So, and we're doing Friday too, right? Both Thursday and Friday.
Yeah, that's the plan. Now, of course, we are all hopeful that we've picked up a second round pick. So just pay attention to how things are going, and check our accounts on social media and stuff for the Friday night show, because if they do make a trade during the day on Friday and pick up a second round pick, then we'll probably come on earlier. So but we'll go both nights as we did last year. Great shows, always a lot of fun.
And I think if you subscribe on YouTube, you get an alert when we go live. So
I believe so. Yeah. I glad you paid attention. I didn't.
And the other, can I mention one more thing before we go to Casey?
Yeah.
So they've got, they've lined up current/future players to announce certain picks. So I think we've got Lynn Swan announcing our 3rd round pick.
Correct.
So everyone who's saying like, oh, we might trade up, like what assets do we have to trade up with?
Right.
We don't have a 2nd round pick. Lynn Swan is announcing our 3rd round pick, so we can't trade that one away. So if you want to trade up, you basically have to give up next year's 1st round pick, which is in Pittsburgh. There's no way this team's going to give up a pick and be like, we're not going to draft it in the 1st round the year that we host it. Like,
right.
People say we're going to trade up to 9 with Carolina. Like, maybe we do, but I just don't see it. Or 8, whatever Carolina.
I cannot
That's
see
just
a
insane
to
me.
I just can't.
No.
I maybe that's I don't know.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am very excited. After a couple weeks off, who the hell knows what he was doing? But anyway, Casey Kasem is back from the grave, and I couldn't be happier about it. Casey, take it away.
Boy. Casey's Coast to Coast, American Top 40. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the week that was April 17th, 1983. Our favorite correspondent, Ryan, is back with us again this week, and he writes, Dear Casey, games people play, you take it or you leave it. Things that they say are not okay. If I promise you a 7th Lombardi, would you believe it? Games people play right before OTAs. Casey? That's, of course, a parody of Games People Play by the Alan Parsons Project off their 1980 album, The Turn of a Friendly Card, which is a concept album with its theme focused on the gambling industry and the fate of gamblers, with more than one reference to Las Vegas. Casey, as you're reading this letter, the Raiders have become the favorites to land Aaron Rodgers. Or, as I like to call him, Dr. DMT. But enough about him. Let's get back to the game. With the NFL draft only a week away, and the Steelers searching for their next wave of talent, I can't help but think all that goes into the process of drafting a player and how, no matter what you do, you just never know if you're going to get a Dree Archer. After all, the Steelers have had 8 consecutive seasons to win a playoff game, and they've come up empty, like when Jack and Jill went up the hill both with $1.25, and Jill came down with $2.50. Oh! That's a little Andrew Dice Clay for
yes,
for
it
the
is. That's great.
Little Miss Muffet.
Anyway, so Casey, I thought it'd be fitting to continue a game and play what's happened since the Steelers' last playoff win.
Oh, God.
Let's get started. Our very own Ian has added 4 kids to his family. Ian not only coined the term Stairway to 7, he has fulfilled the prophecy. His swimmers are like the Eye of Sauron. They will find you wherever you are. President Donald Trump was sworn in not once but twice. That's right, Casey. The Steelers haven't won a playoff game since Barack Drop and Roll was commander-in-chief. Who could forget the COVID-19 pandemic and the variants Omicron? I'm sorry, Omicron. Oh, man, I'm really proud of that one. I'm sorry.
That was good.
we've had 4 Olympic Games, 2 World Cups, 2 Euro Cups. Casey, you get the point. 8 straight seasons without a playoff win. It feels like we're in the Twilight Zone. Well, Ryan, keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars and keep your radio tuned right where it is. Staying at number 23 this week, here's Golden Earring with the Twilight Zone.
Golden Earring
nice.
is great.
Very good. Outstanding return, Casey. Welcome back. Oh man, fantastic little golden earring, Alan Parsons project. I tell you, it doesn't get much better than that. Thanks everybody for being with us tonight. We appreciate you as always, whether you jumped in the chat with us or just listened on your own. Next week, pay attention to the socials because we will likely be on about 9:00. And unless the Steelers drastically or dramatically, I should say, move up or something, then we'll quickly get on. But we want to have just enough time to recap what had happened, and then have enough time to get ready for the Steelers in the first round, and kind of set the groundwork for days 2 and 3 and everything else. So that'll be the plan. Cliff, great job tonight. Thank you so much for filling in, and you did a fantastic job, man. And thanks everybody else, and make sure you check us out, steelcityblitz.com. And don't forget, go Steelers.
And
Ravens suck. Yeah, go Cliff, you do it.
Cliff, go ahead. Say it.
Ravens suck.
There we go. Ben's fired.